On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with the president of the Trade Union Congress, who also doubles as the president of PENGASSAN. He brings us up to speed on the need for casualization of workers to be reduced to various minimum in Nigeria and across the world. He also spoke about just transition and different perspectives that would ensure that employers of labor are ready, the workers are ready, and also the government. Congratulations. It's the first conversation we'll be having after your election as the president of PENGASSAN. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
A lot has been happening in the labor sphere, but we are right here at the 111th conference of the International Labour Organization. And looking at the union you're coming from, I think just transition is just the perfect question for me to ask you. How would you rate Nigeria's preparedness towards just transition, and what has been the discussion so far at the ongoing International Labour Organization conference?
And thank you for congratulating PENGASSAN as well for the transition we just had on the 11th of May. Ironically, it's about 1 month since that election. Yeah, as you have rightly said, here in the ILO, one of the areas that was looked at was the issue of just transition. And for us, just transition is one thing as an association that we have actually that we started talking about. You remember last year in Abuja, when we had our PENGASSAN week, the PENGASSAN Energy and Labour Summit, whereby we brought captains of industries, we brought industry experts to discuss on issues that are bordering on energy transition and just transition. How will this just transition, how will the energy transition actually affect us as workers? What are the skill sets that that will be required for us to start developing today so that we will remain relevant tomorrow? What are those innovations we need to bring to bear as at today so that tomorrow our voices will still be heard and our services will still be required? So all these were what we started last year. And after that function, we came up with a communique and we are also deepening it. But coming back to ILO, one of the things we have said as regard just transition, even in the ILO, and that has been our advocacy internationally, is that, yes, energy transition is okay, we believe in it, we think that's the way to go. But in doing it, they should place much more searchlight and much more focus on those countries that are emitting over 90% of the pollution. Because between the US and China, you know the percentage that they emit, it's quite enormous. Then by the time you now add Europe into it, it's quite much. Africa contributes less than 3% to the global world emission. And at the end of the day, we in Africa, we also need to develop. We in Africa, we have our peculiar challenges and our peculiar problem that we must also look at, domestically. So for us, clearly, one of the things we have advocated is that the transition must be just. The transition must have human face. And the transition must not lead to massive job loss. And the transition must also be able to put food on the table of the masses.
So far, how prepared are your members for the just transition? And what more do you think the government and other relevant stakeholders actually need to do at this point in time to ensure that it doesn't meet us unawares and we are prepared and probably there won't be job loss or other further interference that might affect the daily lives of in your sector most especially?
Yes, as I said a few minutes ago, that one thing in Nigeria is that we like writing, we like putting things on paper, but at the end of the day, it is beyond that. Today, we have the energy transition policy, but we are not seeing the walkthrough, because it's very easy for you to write bogus statements, very easy for you to put things on the paper, but how has this translate into practicality? So we are calling on government that those things that they have put on paper, they should come up and start implementing them. It's not just in theory, but in practice. So again, no doubt that we need some new skills that must be taught. So how have we put this into our university curriculum? Like if you look at Imperial College, they have faced that petroleum engineering. Today, the schools are replacing petroleum engineering with energy engineering. So in Nigeria, what are the those responsible, like Nigerian University Commission, what are they doing about reviewing the curriculum of our studies in engineering as relating to fossil fuel and all that? What have we done? So these are the things that government must sit down and come up with a policy, not just on paper, but how will this policy be implemented? No doubt there will be skill gap. What are the necessary trainings that the employers need to be putting our members through today? Just as we have said, fossil fuel will still remain with us for a while. But even at that, let's also have at the back of our mind that we are moving towards the greener energy. So we must be prepared today so that tomorrow we will not be caught napping. We must be able to put those things in place today so that we'll be ready tomorrow. So government, employers of labor, trade unions, we must all sing with one voice and we must all advocate so that at the end, the Nigerian workers and the Nigerian masses will be better for it.
Recently, you spoke about casualization of workers in the country. It's not just the oil and gas sector that is faced with this particular ugly trend. We also have the financial sector and other sectors faced with this pandemic. What more do you think can be done to ensure that decent work is promoted and we have more workers in paid employment rather than being casual workers, be it in any form, outsourcing, insourcing, they call it different names. So what more can be done by labor and every other tripartite to ensure that we have decent work, and which might be needed more right now because the standard of living has actually, the inflation has actually skyrocketed and expectations are high.
Most of the government institutions are very weak. Most of the government institutions are not functioning. If you go to some certain countries, even in African countries like Angola, there are things you cannot do. The ways with which you employ labor, it's spelled out. Casualization, you can't do it the same way you are doing it in Nigeria. Because if you do it, it is not the trade unions that will come after you. The trade unions will act as whistleblowers. It is the government agencies that will come. They can even revoke your license. But in Nigeria, the reverse is the case. We have government agencies who are not proactive, who doesn't do what they ought to do. We also had a labor ministry that are not doing the things they ought to do. Because if you go to a lot of organizations today, core jobs that are in organogram, the organic jobs are being done by casual staff, which clearly negate the principles of outsourcing. So for us, the government institutions must be strong. In fact, Nigeria, we have an opportunity today because we have a new government in place. And we have called on this new government that whosoever you want to send to the Ministry of Labor should be somebody that understands the labor policies, should be somebody that understands the ILO conventions, should be somebody that has even practiced maybe HRO or has been a unionist in the past. So it must be a round peg in a round hole. Don't go and give us somebody who will come to the job and will spend the first 2 years learning, because it is a special ministry. It is a ministry that does not just deal with equipment, they don't just deal with tools, but they deal with human beings. They deal with emotions, they deal with feelings, they deal with people's job. So for you to bring somebody into that ministry, it must be somebody that understands the fundamentals of industrial relations. So for us, that has been our advocacy. So we'll start from there, so that that person will not be able to re-engineer the Ministry of Labor. Because Ministry of Labor, there are a lot of things that the employers are doing that Ministry of Labor ought to be checkmating. But not a situation where you have a labor ministry who sides with the employers and allow Nigerians and the workers to be exploited. So let us start from there. So by the time we are able to do that, then the trade unions will now be like whistleblowers, just as it is in other climes and other parts of the world. Casualization is killing Nigerians. People are working and they are underpaid, and the companies are going away with millions and billions of naira and dollars as profit. The permanent staff are being retrenched and replaced with contract staff. A permanent staff that is earning, let's assume, 200,000 naira per month. You retrench that person, you bring in casual staff that a daily pay maybe 2,000 naira per day, and that person will work for maybe 22 days in a month, and it goes on 44,000 naira. So it is that bad. This particular person will not have paid leave. When you go on leave, you are not paid. When you go on maternity leave, you are not paid. When the job finish, you will go home with nothing. Even your contributory pension, in most cases, are not even paid. What a miserable life. So for us, we are ready to partner with the government institutions, but those institutions must be up and doing. They must be ready and be willing to work, because, like as we have said, governance is not a tea party. Governance is not for the weak. Governance is not for those that doesn't know what to do. But governance are for the strong, are for those that are innovative, and those that understand what it takes to lead.
Finally, going back to the International Labour Organization conference, which we are here in Geneva, Switzerland, the theme of the discourse centered mostly on social justice, which also lead us also to social protection, which is important again at this point. Personally, that's my personal view. As the Trade Union Congress president, as the president of PENGASSAN, what more needs to be done to ensure that we have more Nigerians covered, be it the unemployed or the aged? What more can be done to ensure that they are protected socially? Perhaps maybe there will be it will be a better condition for living condition for either the ordinary Nigerians or workers at large.
Yes, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. All over the world, in the Western world, you have a lot of social protection. You have somebody that is out of his job, then there are some level of protection and welfare packages for such person. And you have people, you have the old people, those that have worked all through their lives. And at the end of the day, they have retired, they are now sick. There are some forms of social protection that are extended to them. But the foundation or the fundamental problem we have as a country, the fundamental problem we have is that in Nigeria, we don't have database. So if you ask now, how many retirees do we have in the private sector, in the public sector? I'm not sure that database exists. If you ask now, clearly, how many people are unemployed in Nigeria? How many people are underemployed? Forget those bogus statistics. Those are numbers that they throw around. But if you ask them to show you, they are not there. So I think the first place that we must start from is that let us develop a robust database. And these things are not rocket science. These things are things that can be done. Today we have BVN. Today we have the NIM. Today we have the database that are with the passport, the immigration. We also have the database that are with the Electoral Commission. Why can't you synchronize all these to have a national database? Once you have a national database, then all our houses, they should be properly addressed. So once you have a database, you match it to where people live. You will be able to plan. So the difficulty, the reason we have not been able to plan over these years as a country is because database. Even today, clearly, do we truly know how many we are? We banter statistics all around. People give birth in the rural areas that never visit hospitals. How do we capture them? So as a country, we must be serious. It is after this, then we'll be talking much more about social protection. If you remember very well, that we did conditional cash transfer, in the last 8 years of the previous administration. But we have asked, who are the people? I don't know. If you have relatives that received the 5,000 naira. So we have been asking questions. We see that they tell us that they send 5,000 naira here and there, but we never see them. We don't know how those money are being distributed. Where are the database? Who are those that receive them? Where are their name number? Where are their account number? So social protection for us, yes, we advocate, we push for it. For those that we can capture today, let us do it. But it shouldn't be an opportunity for corruption. It shouldn't be an opportunity for siphoning the commonwealth of the country.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijasan. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.